Andrew, can I come to you next? Andrew Lowson from York Bid to give some thoughts on the white paper. Andrew, good morning and you're very welcome.
Yep, thank you very much, and thanks for asking me to outline a few, I suppose, points on this today from the perspective of the Northern Bids Group. I mean, just to explain to people, I mean, Northern Bids it's kind of like an informal group, but was formed back in 2016, and it kind of consists of the bid directors from the larger cities in the north. So that includes Bradford, Chester, Leeds, Liverpool, Manchester, Newcastle, Sheffield, Sunderland, and ourselves in York. And I mean, just as an overview, that combined, we represent around about 8,000 businesses. An overall RV representation of around about 105 million, and we invest around about 40 million of private sector money through our bid levies, obviously, as part of our business plan. So yes, OJ, a few weeks ago, said, could I maybe speak to the Northern Bids Group and just get their views on the levelling up paper. And we weren't able to do that as part of a group session. It just missed it, unfortunately. But I spoke to a few people on the phone and sent around an email. And I think, I mean, I don't plan to speak at great length today because we might tease some things out as part of the discussion. But I suppose just touching a little bit on what OJ said there, maybe a little bit of a feeling of slightly being underwhelmed, I think, was the general feeling that I got back. And I'll just go through a few points. So I'll kind of switch screens and look across because I'm keen to communicate what came back from my colleagues rather than just talking from a York perspective. But I mean, you'll notice when I go down these points, there's a consistent theme, and it all comes down to money. If I'm being honest, seeing tangible money that could actually make tangible change, I suppose. So I mean, I think just to start off, I mean, I think most people agreed that the 12 policy objectives seem to hit the right marks. I mean, that's a definite positive, and I suppose it won't be of surprise that the key ones of interest to the bid directors were in the areas of regen and town centres, public transport, and also skills and employment. So from a bids perspective, those are the ones that people were most interested in to kind of scratch below the surface and have more of an understanding of the detail. I think one thing which was a little bit surprising was we felt that maybe at a headline level there wasn't quite enough reference to green and sustainable drivers. Just considering, I'm sure OG and other colleagues will agree with this. In the past few years, as the city centres, we understand that actually, sustainability is going to be really at the heart of how city centres regenerate. They're themes that both businesses and the public are very interested in. From a tourism perspective, we think they're going to be key drivers where people will make decisions on going to destinations. So I think that was one thing that didn't kind of come across quite as strongly as maybe we expected. I think I mean, going down these points, I think I mean, in terms of finance, it's just a question of where there is mention of some of the money, it's that understanding of what difference will it actually make when it's spread around. So when it talks about the Safer Streets Fund and kind of references 50 million pounds around that, I suppose it's that thinking that once that is spread around, actually what will that actually achieve? It sounds like a lot of money, but if you're kind of spreading that across the regions, it's just actually what tangible difference that will make. I think in terms of devolution was obviously kind of brought up, and I suppose that feeling from the Northern Bids directors, that a real strong feeling that there's got to be a real link between devolution and how any of this is going to happen. And again, when clear ideas of money come through, that hope that money would actually be really tied to decisions being made at a local level, rather than, I suppose, local leaders having to go cap in hand down to London, meet targets, and the decisions being made elsewhere rather than that local area. And I suppose coming from a York perspective, quite specifically, I think that regional understanding, which hopefully will come with devolution, we feel is quite key, because York quite often misses out on central pots of money. And I kind of understand why, because if you're looking at a place like York from an objective perspective, it looks like quite a wealthy city. We have bounced back very well from COVID, so I'm not going to pretend that we have the issues that other cities do. We do well. However, at a local level, we do still have our problems. I mean, people forget that York actually was built on very working class routes. The railways, chocolate factories, a lot of that has obviously disappeared. And so we don't necessarily have those high skilled jobs. We are quite reliant on tourism. It plays a big part, but we have our issues, and I can see my colleague from Falmouth in Cornwall down there will understand issues of actually affordability. Because a lot of our workers in the hospitality retail sector obviously are on huge wages, and yet the price of housing, cost of living in a place like York is very high, and so that causes problems with actually how do we get that workforce. But we quite often miss out on these funding pots because we're seen to be as a city that from the outside perspective looks to be doing well. So I suppose the reason I tell that story is the fact that, again, any kind of money to do with levelling up, I think really the devolution part is absolutely key, because that understanding of those local dynamics is going to be absolutely crucial. I think just going down, again, just looking at what my colleagues have talked about, I think, again, good to see the link with the High Street Task Force. I mean, I think it is positive that there's, those skills there to help local authorities with economic master plans. But I think, again, there was a little bit of skepticism from the group that unless we can actually see tangible money to back up those master plans taking place, it's all very well having blueprints, but actually, how do you actually make those come to fruition? A big one for my colleagues, probably in places such as Bradford, Leeds, Newcastle, was public transport. For those of you who know the north, there's long been talk about better Transpennine connections, because I mean, again, we're quite lucky in York because we can go east to west quite easily, but going from Newcastle right through to like a Liverpool or Manchester, the connections are quite poor, much poorer than you'd think them to be. So real frustration that the Northern Powerhouse rail project hasn't really had much momentum, or hasn't really come to fruition as many would like to see. And I suppose again, when you look at going back to some of Ojo's points about comparisons with London, which, I mean, I know London is a different kettle of fish, but we naturally look down there, and yes, if you just look at a recent NAO report which put the cost of the Whitechapel station alone as part of Crossrail at a cost of £1 billion just for one station. That's where sometimes we feel a little bit neglected in the north, I have to admit, and I'm sure regional colleagues will feel the same when we can't get together money to do projects in our part of the world. So I mean, I suppose just to conclude as well, I mean, I think coming back to the money side of things, I mean the reason why from a bids perspective, because obviously, like a lot of colleagues, we get involved in putting on events and festivals and various things, to draw footfall into cities. And it's been great to have ARG money and likes over the past few years to really help that. I think speaking to our northern big colleagues, I mean, I think there's that realization. We all know that COVID has sped up a lot of transformations with the high street, and a lot of the challenges that were coming before COVID have been accelerated. We all know that. But a lot of that comes around how do we reinvent our high streets, what's going to be fit for purpose for the coming 30, 40 years, very different from the traditional high street. And that reshaping is obviously going to need some serious money. I suppose what I mean by that is I don't think levelling up can be about handing out small amounts of money for events and festivals. We need to really reshape our cities, and there's an increasing realization from bids that working with their local councils to really look at economic master plans that change the built environment, reshape traditional high streets from that big floor plan retail, breaking that down, looking at leisure, green space, etc. That's going to be absolutely key. And that's why, again, going back to the previous points, things like high street task force, helping local authorities with that capacity is going to be crucial. But again, until we see how there's going to be some serious money to back those plans up, that's probably going back to the start of what I was talking about, maybe why there was a little bit of an underwhelming feeling from some of my colleagues, because until we get to see how there's going to be that tangible difference, it does feel like a little bit of a paper exercise at the moment. So yes, I'm sure we could talk about each policy area in a lot more detail, but that hopefully just gives a little bit of an overview of what my colleagues said, and happy to open it up to the floor from there.